Today we're going to be replacing the wheel bearing, as we've had a couple of odd symptoms. I will explain them a little later in the video, but the first stage is to remove the centre cap, and then we can crack that bolt there. So we've got a 14mm socket with a short extension, and I'm just wondering if I've got enough leverage with a regular ratchet. I may need a breaker bar on this. So we'll fully remove this bolt for the drive shaft. There we go. I understand you do need a new one of these. So I've now got the vehicle jacked up, and the next stage is to remove the caliper. I think before I do that I will place an axle stand under there just in case. So I've got an axle stand in, and there's just these little bunks to remove, ×2, and then you either need an Allen key or a hex drive set. So just crack these loose and wind them out. I do actually quite like to just pull on it on the end as I'm winding out with these, as it just prevents the bolt from catching on anything. And before we go too far down the road of deconstruction, just take a 10mm spanner to this little nut here and withdraw it. And we can also use the spanner just to assist in removing this clip from the brake caliper. And now what we want to do is just compress this piston back ever so slightly. We're not doing a pad replacement. If you are doing a pad replacement, go a bit further. So we just got to insert the screwdriver. It's a bit of a fiddly one, just in the disc there. Well, I've withdrawn the caliper and the other brake pad, and what I need to do is get something to hang it up with, because we don't want to put any stress on the brake hose. We don't want it hanging by that. So now we need to remove this carrier here, and there are two 15mm bolts to remove, and I actually like to use a hex socket because it's less likely to slip than a star socket. These nuts are invariably quite tight, and as you can see, I'm having to use a breaker bar on them just to get them moving. So that's the carrier removed, and this bit here, if you do put this on flipped the other way around, you won't have very much steering lock, so just take care when reassembling it. So we'll remove the disc. Every little lump that is. And now we've got these bolts here. They're for the wheel bearing, and we're going to access these from behind here. So what we have to do is move the drive shaft back in order to do that. There's a few other bits and bobs to do first, but I think what we'll do is we'll give everything a good spraying with some penetrating fluid, just to make life a little easier. We're going to have to remove these bolts, so I want to really give them a good dousing. And also the ones on the bearing and the heat shield, the brake shield. Now, as luck would have it, our drive shaft is pretty loose. Can move that out the way, which gives access to these two bolts. So we could probably manage if it were just these two bolts to get them out the way. But if we have a look at the other side, you can hopefully see it's a totally different story. I haven't really got any good access to those bolts, so it's got to come out, unfortunately. So there are 3 bolts on the heat shield, 12mm. That's actually a bit stiff. So I'm just going to work it forwards and backwards and just coax it out. I don't want to shear it, because if a bolt's stiff and you keep applying too much force, That's what invariably will happen at some stage. Now before I go any further, and I probably could have done this a couple of stages earlier, I just want to check the brand new bearing for compatibility, check everything is the same, and the good news is it does look the same, so I can now proceed. Now one technique I like to use rather than just applying leverage to bolts is I'll take the hammer and just give some ever so gentle little taps to a spanner once I've taken the slack up, and what that effectively does is it's a bit of a hammering action, a bit like an impact gun. You don't have to go mad at it, just ensure all the slack's taken out the spanner like so before striking it. I'll demonstrate on this one. Just ever so gentle little taps, and there it goes. It's a lot easier than just applying leverage to it, because if something's not right, you know, you'll shear this bolt off and cause no end of problems. That's the heat shield removed, and with that it gives us excellent access to this ABS sensor here, which I want to remove just to prevent any risk of damaging it. So we've had it soaking in the penetrating fluid. So just take a 10mm socket and an extension and remove that bolt, holding the ABS sensor in place. And hopefully the penetrating fluid is soaked down underneath it, just to enable it to be effortlessly wiggled out. I'm in luck because this drive shaft is actually free, but if it isn't, you'd have to take something like a chisel and hammer in and push it back. Leaving with the drive shaft fully back, there is a risk of damaging this reluctor ring, which I'm not willing to take. I really need a bit more room. This is the best side, it's even worse and inaccessible on the other side. So what I'm going to do, we're going to undo these bolts. This one's a 21mm and the corresponding side is 18mm. So I'm going to take a breaker bar to that side, as that's where the nut is. I have actually sprayed these a few times off camera, so the penetrating fluid should have soaked in quite well. So I've got the upper one which kind of just turns, but the whole bolt's spinning, and the lower one that's turning just on the nut quite acceptable, so that means the bolt's seized inside. So we'll keep hitting it with a penetrating spray. You could always use an impact gun on it. This is how I used to do it before I owned one. Just nice and carefully. So we've got the top one free, and we're just turning the nut that side so the length of the bolt's in. We'll give it another spray. I'm just thinking if I use the leverage of the bar, this may just get things moving to save tapping from the other side. I'd rather turn the bolt out than tap it. And we're now moving, so that's good news. We'll just keep working that back and forth. So we'll just remove the top bolt. You see the amount of corrosion. I'm going to give these a bit of a clean up before I put them back. With the top bolt removed, and I may not need to remove the lower bolt, but the good news is it is loosened off. The whole thing just springs towards me, so I need to tap the drive shaft out just to give me a bit more room, and we'll see if we can work within that little bit of space. So now tap the drive shaft out, and that's gave us access to the 4 bolts for the wheel bearing. So we'll give them a squirt and try and break them loose. So I actually put a blob of oil on these exposed threads, as it's a little bit more economical than the penetrating fluid. So that's the easy access one, coming out quite nicely. And we'll see how we get on with its friends. So I'll just move the drive shaft out the way, and that's going to give us access to these 2, and then another move, and then we can get that one. We might have to use an extension. It's just kind of working out at the minute. Well, no, I think we'll get away without the extension. We're just breaking it loose. It's quite a slim-ended ratchet, this, which is giving it a little advantage. If I had a chunkier ratchet, I don't think I'd be getting away with this without the extension. And now for the last one. So that's the 4 bolts removed, and now we'll see if this comes off with our persuader. And out it comes. Ooh, what a mess. I think we'll give that a bit of a clean up. So I've given it the best clean up I can afford it, and there's quite a bit of corrosion all around here. And I'm not actually too worried about it. Basically because the bearing's going to mount on these 4 surfaces, so they're nice and square. There's sufficient aluminium behind it for the structure, so we're going to rebuild. I'm not feeling the need to renew this hub, but I think what I will do is maybe put a smear of grease around that just to keep it clean. So we've got our new bargain bearing. I never told you it were a bargain. I will disclose the price at the end of the video, because I really want to share that with you. I do hope them bargains are still there on eBay for all to bag. We'll fit this in here. You see, I greased the surfaces. These are the replacement bolts that came with the bearing, all new, and the one for the drive shaft with a bit of green thread lock there. Some people say to put thread lock on there, but I'm convinced if things are torqued up correctly that should not be necessary. Okay, so that's all the bolts reinstated, a little more than finger tight. They've just had a little pinch with the ratchets, so it looks like it's a 3-stage torquing procedure. First up, 20 Newton meters going in a crisscross pattern, so that's that corner to that corner, and then that corner to that corner. We'll go back to the beginning for good measure, and that's good. Then to 45 Newton meter. Then 60 degrees. It's quite fiddly getting the torque wrench in here if you've got quite a large torque wrench, which I have. The small one ain't strong enough to do it, but we'll put 60 degrees on there, so that's there. I've got my little device to get up to 60. Well, you will find that that's pretty tight, so we'll put the drive shaft back in. Just locate it in, ready. And flip everything back together, like so. It pays to do that slowly and just check that this is going in straight. So we've now got this bolt to reinstate, and it's, well, I've gleaned from the internet, it's 25 to 26 foot-pounds, and then a 90-degree turn at the end of it. So I'll do that and see how it feels, but I think I've got to build the rest of the car up first. So what I like to do is put a smear of grease round this hub here, as it prevents your brake disc sticking to it or your wheel sticking to it whenever you want to remove it. I am actually reusing these brake discs, as they're pretty good, and I do keep on top of them with regular servicing, so they never really get too worn, and the brake discs do actually last me a long time because of that reason. Well, that's one wheel on, and all seems to be moving nice and free. I'll just take a moment to show you the old wheel bearing, and it's really stiff to turn, and it feels quite gritty. Now, there were a couple of telltale signs that I needed to replace this wheel bearing. Yeah, so we had a whirring sound and we pinned it down to this corner, and I do suspect we're right. Also, I jacked the wheel up, put it in neutral, and the wheel had only seem to do half a turn, and things seem a lot freer no matter which way I spin the wheel now, so I'm quite pleased with that. Another telltale clue is if you go into a right hand bend a little bit on the, we'll say, spirited side, the noise actually goes away temporarily, and then when you come out and straighten up, the whirring noise returns. So what we're going to do, I think we'll give that to the scrap man, and this is the kit I actually got. A Drivemaster wheel bearing kit, and all the bolts were exactly the same, but that was a slightly different, I think it's 13mm where the original were 14 for some weird reason, and that cost the princely sum of £9.99 delivered on eBay. And I do hope, if you're looking for one, there is one on eBay for that money, because the other price is around £40 I believe. So we've torqued this nut up for the drive shaft to 26 pound-foot, and then we've gone a further 90 degrees, so there's only one more job to do now, and having torqued the wheel nuts up, I'll declare this job complete. Many thanks for watching, and why not subscribe to learn of more low cost solutions.